The cold metal of the handcuffs bit into my wrists as Officer Rodriguez read me my Miranda rights. I stood frozen in my childhood bedroom, staring at the small plastic bag of white powder sitting on my old dresser like it belonged there. My sister Ashley stood next to our parents, tears streaming down her face in a performance worthy of an Oscar. Mom and Dad nodded solemnly when the officers asked if this was indeed my room. My heart shattered as I watched my own family betray me without hesitation. The officer's voice cut through my shock. "You are under arrest for possession of controlled substances." As they led me out in handcuffs past our neighbor's curious stares, I caught Ashley's reflection in the hallway mirror. She was smirking. 3 weeks before that nightmare, my life was actually pretty great. I lived in a cozy one-bedroom apartment downtown, about 30 minutes from my parents' house. At 28 years old, I had worked my way up to a solid position as an accountant at Henderson & Associates, one of the most respected firms in the city. My boyfriend Derek, a 30-year-old architect with kind eyes and a terrible sense of humor that I loved, had been talking about our future more and more lately. I had even secretly bought an engagement ring, planning to propose to him on our upcoming trip to the mountains. My sister Ashley, on the other hand, had just moved back in with our parents after losing yet another job. At 25, she had been fired from 3 different positions in 2 years. The reasons varied, but the pattern was always the same. Ashley would start out enthusiastic, then slowly her attendance would slip, her attitude would sour, and eventually she would clash with a manager or coworker until the inevitable termination. Mom and Dad always made excuses. The boss was unreasonable. The coworkers were jealous. The company did not appreciate her creativity. That Sunday, I drove to my parents' house for our weekly family dinner. Dad grilled chicken in the backyard while Mom fussed over her famous potato salad in the kitchen. Ashley seemed unusually cheerful, which should have been my first warning sign. After dinner, I excused myself to use the bathroom upstairs. On my way back down, I noticed Ashley slipping out of my old bedroom, the one I had not lived in since moving out 7 years ago. "What were you doing in there?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She jumped slightly, then smiled. "Oh, just feeling nostalgic. Looking at your old stuff. Remember when we used to share clothes and you would get so mad?" I did not remember it quite that way. I remembered Ashley borrowing my clothes without asking and returning them stained or torn, but I just nodded and headed back downstairs. When I mentioned it to Mom and Dad later, they immediately defended her. "Don't be so paranoid, Carmel," Dad said, not looking up from his newspaper. "She's going through a tough time. Let her have her memories," Mom added. "You've always been so suspicious of your sister. She's just trying to reconnect with family." I drove home that night with an uneasy feeling I could not quite shake. 2.5 weeks later, I was sitting in a cold interrogation room at the police station, still in shock. Detective Harris, a stern-looking woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, sat across from me reviewing a file. "Miss Walker," she said, her voice neutral but her gaze penetrating. "You want to explain why we found methamphetamine in your bedroom?" "That's not my bedroom," I said for what felt like the 100th time. "I have not lived at my parents' house in 7 years. I have my own apartment downtown. I can show you my lease, my utility bills, everything." Detective Harris leaned back in her chair. "We received an anonymous tip this morning. When we arrived at your parents' residence, your sister Ashley informed us she had discovered the drugs while cleaning your old room. She was preparing for your parents' anniversary party this weekend and wanted to surprise them. She said she found the bag in the back of your dresser drawer, hidden under some old yearbooks." My stomach turned. "That's impossible. I have not been in that room in months." The detective slid a paper across the table. "Your parents confirmed that you visited the house yesterday. They said you seemed agitated, nervous. They mentioned you've been acting strange lately. I felt like I was in a nightmare I could not wake up from. I was at work all day yesterday. I have time cards, security footage from my building." "This is insane!" Detective Harris watched me carefully. "The fingerprints on the bag are smudged. Inconclusive. But I have to tell you, Miss Walker, it does not look good. The drugs were found in your childhood bedroom, in a drawer containing your personal items from high school. Your family members are all saying the same thing." Then came the twist that made my blood run cold. "I need you to understand something," Detective Harris continued. "Your sister Ashley is the one who called 911. She gave us very specific information about where to find the drugs. Exact drawer, exact location. She led us right to them without any hesitation, like she knew precisely where they would be. And both your parents have given statements supporting every detail of her story. They say you came by yesterday acting suspicious and spent time alone in that room. I sat there, unable to speak, as the full weight of the betrayal crashed over me. My own sister had not just framed me, she had planned it meticulously. And my parents, the people who were supposed to love and protect me, had backed her up completely. Derek posted my bail. $10,000 we could not really afford, pulled from our savings for the house we had been planning to buy. When he picked me up from holding, I collapsed into his arms in the parking lot and sobbed until I had no tears left. "We're going to fight this," he said fiercely, holding me tight. "We're going to prove you're innocent. But how do you prove you did not do something when your own family is lying about you?" 2 days later, there was a knock on my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach drop. Mom, Dad, and Ashley stood in the hallway. For a moment, I hoped they had come to apologize, to tell the police the truth, to fix the nightmare they had created. I was so naive. I opened the door and they filed in, their faces serious. Nobody hugged me. Nobody asked if I was okay. They sat down on my couch like they were there for a business meeting. "Carmel," Dad said, his voice taking on that tone he used when he was about to tell me to do something I would not like. "We need you to do something for the family." Mom reached over and patted my hand. "Sweetie, we know this is hard. But Ashley is trying to get her life back on track. She cannot have this kind of scandal attached to our family name." I stared at them, not understanding. "What are you talking about? I'm the one who got arrested for drugs that aren't mine." Ashley looked down at her hands, playing the part of the ashamed sister perfectly. Dad cleared his throat. "We know the drugs aren't yours, Carmel. We know exactly whose they are." The room started spinning. "You know? You know. And you still let them arrest me?" Mom squeezed my hand tighter, like that would somehow make what she was about to say okay. "Let me explain, honey. Ashley's ex-boyfriend Marcus was a dealer. When they broke up a few months ago, Ashley took some product from him. She thought of it as insurance, in case he tried to cause trouble." Ashley finally spoke up, her voice small and trembling. "Marcus started threatening me. He wanted his drugs back. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I hid them in your old room because I knew you never went in there anymore. I thought they'd be safe. And then Marcus found out somehow," I said slowly, the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. "He threatened to go to the police about Ashley, so Ashley called them first and framed me instead." The silence that followed was answer enough. Dad leaned forward, his expression pleading. "You have to understand, sweetheart. Ashley's already struggling. She's been fired from 3 jobs. She's depressed. She's trying to get her life together. You, on the other hand, you're strong. You have a good job, a stable life, a boyfriend who loves you. You can handle this." Mom nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. We've already talked to a lawyer. If you plead guilty to simple possession, you'll probably just get community service and maybe some probation. It will be a misdemeanor. You can afford a good lawyer to minimize the consequences. Think of it as helping your sister get a fresh start." I could not believe what I was hearing. "You want me to plead guilty to a crime I did not commit? To have a criminal record? To potentially lose my job, my career, everything I've worked for?" Ashley finally looked up at me, and for just a second, I saw something cold in her eyes. "It's not that big of a deal, Carmel. You always land on your feet. I need help this time. For once, can't you just be there for your sister?" Then Dad dropped the real bomb. "We'll give you $50,000 to help with legal fees and, well, to make it worth your while. We've already talked to an attorney about the best way to handle this, to minimize the impact on your record." They had planned this. They had actually sat down, discussed the best way to manipulate me into taking the fall for Ashley's crime, and come up with a price tag for my future. "Get out," I whispered. "Carmel, be reasonable," Mom started. "Get out!" I screamed. "Get out of my apartment. Get out of my life. I can't believe you would ask me to do this." They left, but not before Dad turned at the door and said, "Think about it, Carmel. Think about what's best for the family. We raised you better than to be selfish." After they left, I sat on my floor and cried until Derek came home from work and found me there. When I told him what my parents had asked me to do, he held me and said something I will never forget. "They didn't raise you, Carmel. They trained you. They trained you to sacrifice yourself for Ashley, over and over, until you thought that was what love looked like. But that's not love. That's abuse." The next few days were a blur of anxiety and disbelief. I kept replaying every childhood memory, seeing them all through this new horrible lens. The time Ashley crashed Dad's car, and somehow I got grounded for not warning her about the icy roads. The time Ashley failed out of community college and Mom and Dad gave her my college fund because I was doing well enough with scholarships and student loans anyway. The time Ashley's first wedding, which lasted exactly 8 months, cost $60,000 while Derek and I had eloped to save money, and my parents complained we had not given them a real celebration. I had been the responsible one, the easy one, the one who never caused problems. And that had made me the convenient one to blame. Derek connected me with a lawyer his firm had worked with before, a woman named Margaret Hayes. She was 52 years old with steel gray hair, sharp suits, and a reputation for being absolutely fierce in the courtroom. When we met in her office downtown, she listened to my entire story without interrupting, taking notes in neat, precise handwriting. When I finished, she looked up at me with eyes that had seen every kind of injustice. "Miss Walker, I don't represent people who are guilty. I especially don't represent people who plead guilty when they're innocent. So I need you to tell me right now if there's any part of this story that isn't true." "It's all true," I said firmly. "Every word." Margaret nodded and started pulling up documents on her computer. "Let's talk about what doesn't make sense here. You haven't lived in that house in 7 years. You have your own apartment. Why would you keep drugs at your parents' house, in a room you don't use, in a drawer with your high school yearbooks?" "Exactly," I said. "It makes no sense." "The police didn't think about that, though, because your family confirmed you had been there the day before. Let me guess. You weren't actually there?" I pulled out my phone. "I was at work all day. I can get security footage from my building showing me leaving that morning and coming home that evening. My car has GPS. My time cards will show I clocked in at 8:15 and didn't leave until 6:30. Margaret smiled, and it was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just spotted weakness in their praise story. "Good. We're going to request all the evidence. Police body cam footage, the 911 call, witness statements, everything. I want to see exactly how this went down." It took 3 days for Margaret to get the evidence. And when she called me to come back to her office, her voice had a sharp edge of satisfaction to it. "Sit down," she said when I arrived. "You need to see this." She played the 911 call first. Ashley's voice came through the speakers, and even I could hear how rehearsed it sounded. "911, what's your emergency?" "I need to report drugs. I found drugs in my sister's room. I was cleaning for my parents' anniversary party, and I found methamphetamine hidden in her dresser drawer, the second one down on the left side, pushed all the way to the back under her old yearbooks." Margaret paused it. "Listen to that. She's not panicked. She's not shocked. She's giving them an inventory. She knew exactly where those drugs were because she put them there." Then Margaret showed me the body cam footage from the responding officers. Ashley met them at the door, led them upstairs without hesitation, walked directly to the room, opened the exact drawer, and pulled out the bag like she was following a script. "No searching," Margaret said. "No confusion about which room or which drawer." She walked them right to it. Next, Margaret pulled up my phone records. "Look at this. Ashley called your cell phone 4 times the day before the so-called discovery. You never answered. She left no voicemails. Want to know what I think? I think she was building a paper trail. She wanted to be able to say you were being secretive, avoiding family, acting suspicious. It fits the narrative that you were hiding drug use." "That's brilliant," I said, feeling sick. "Horrible, but brilliant." "It gets better," Margaret said, and pulled up another document. 3 weeks ago, in the next county over, a man named Marcus Reynolds filed a police report claiming his ex-girlfriend stole drugs from him. Want to guess who the ex-girlfriend was? "Ashley," I breathed. "Ashley," Margaret confirmed. "The detectives on your case never connected it because it was filed in a different jurisdiction, and Marcus didn't mention her by name in the initial report, just said, Ex-girlfriend. But I did some digging. Marcus and Ashley dated for 6 months. They broke up right around the time he filed that report. And according to the report, he suspected she took approximately 2 ounces of methamphetamine from his apartment. So we have motive, I said. We have motive, means, and opportunity, Margaret said. We have proof Ashley had access to drugs. We have proof she had a reason to get rid of them. We have proof she knew exactly where they were in that house. And we have proof that her story about how she found them is questionable at best. What about my parents? I asked. Why would they lie for her? That, Margaret said, is the question we're going to answer in court. But I have a theory. Let me subpoena some more records first. Margaret worked fast. Within a week, she had subpoenaed Ashley's phone records, bank statements, and text messages. She had also gotten her hands on my parents' phone records. What she found was damning. You need to see this, Margaret said at our next meeting. She spread printouts across her desk. These are text messages between Ashley and Marcus over the past 3 weeks. I read through them, my horror growing with each message. Marcus, where's my product? Ashley, I don't have it anymore. Marcus, that's not an answer. Get it back or you'll regret it. Ashley, I'm handling it, Marcus. Handle it faster, or I'm going to the cops. Ashley, I said I'm handling it. I have a plan. Marcus, it better be a good one. There were dozens more, each more threatening than the last. Ashley had been terrified, that much was clear. But instead of going to the police herself or getting help, she had decided to frame me. Now look at this, Margaret said, pulling up Ashley's bank records. See these deposits? 2,000 here, 3,000 there, another 1,500. They add up to over $20,000 in the past 6 months. All cash deposits, never the same amount, spread out over time. She was dealing for him, I said. She was dealing for him, Margaret confirmed. And I found out why she got fired from her last job. The manager suspected she was selling to coworkers. He couldn't prove it. But Head noticed some things. People going to her car during breaks, cash changing hands. He fired her before he had to get police involved and create a scandal for the company. I felt like I was seeing my sister clearly for the first time in my life. This wasn't just about making a mistake. This was about a pattern of behavior, of choosing the easy, illegal way instead of putting in actual work. There's more, Margaret said quietly. I also pulled your parents' phone records. Your dad called your boss at Henderson and Associates 2 days after your arrest. What? I sat up straight. Why would he call my boss? Margaret played an audio recording. I don't know how she had gotten it, and I decided I did not want to know. My father's voice came through clearly. Hi, this is George Walker, Carmel Walker's father. I wanted to reach out to you because my daughter is going through some personal issues right now. Some substance abuse problems, actually. She was arrested a few days ago. I thought you should know, as her employer, that she's struggling. She might need some time off, or, well, you might want to consider whether she should continue in her current position during this difficult time. My boss' response was professional but concerned. I appreciate you letting me know, Mr. Walker. We'll be discussing this with HR and determining the appropriate next steps. Margaret turned off the recording. They called an emergency meeting the next day about you. They decided to put you on administrative leave during your legal proceedings. They sabotaged my job, I whispered. They actively tried to destroy my career. They wanted you desperate, Margaret said. If you had no income, no savings because of legal fees, you'd have no choice but to take their deal. I used my old key, the one I had never returned, and walked right in. Mom and Dad were in the living room watching television. They looked up in surprise. Carmel, Mom said, standing up. Sweetheart, we didn't know you were coming. I know what you did, I said without preamble. I know you called my boss. I know you're trying to sabotage my life so I'll be desperate enough to take your deal. Dad's face hardened. We're trying to help you see reason. You're being stubborn about this, and it's hurting the whole family. I'm being stubborn? I laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. I'm being stubborn because I won't plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit? Mom walked over and tried to take my hands. I pulled away. Carmel, please. Why can't you just help your sister? She made a mistake. One mistake. You're going to let that ruin her entire life? She didn't make one mistake, I said. She's been dealing drugs for Marcus for months. She's been depositing thousands of dollars in cash. She got fired because her boss suspected she was selling to coworkers. This isn't a mistake. This is who Ashley is. That's not true, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. My lawyer has bank records, text messages, everything. Ashley was in deep with Marcus, and when he threatened her, she decided it was easier to destroy me than face the consequences of her own choices. The front door opened and Ashley walked in, probably having heard the raised voices from outside. She looked at all of us and her face went carefully neutral. "Oh good, you're here," I said. "I was just telling Mom and Dad about your little drug dealing business." Ashley's eyes went wide. "I don't know what you're talking about." $20,000, Ashley. $20,000 in cash deposits over 6 months. Text messages with Marcus about product and threats. You weren't just holding drugs for him. You were working for him. You're lying, Ashley said, but her voice shook. Mom put her arm around Ashley. "Stop attacking your sister. Can't you see she's upset?" "I'm upset," I shouted. "I'm the one who got arrested. I'm the one who lost my job. I'm the one whose own family tried to destroy her life. We're trying to protect this family," Dad said, his voice rising to match mine. "You've always been selfish, Carmel. Always thinking about yourself. For once, can't you think about what's best for everyone?" "What's best for everyone," I said slowly, "is for Ashley to face the consequences of her actions instead of me facing them for her." That's when my parents issued their ultimatum. Dad stood up, his face red. "Fine. You want to fight this? You want to drag this family through the mud? Then here's what's going to happen. You take the deal, stay in this family, and well, all move forward. Or you fight it, and you lose this family forever." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "Well, testify against you in court if we have to, Carmel. Well, say we saw you acting erratically. Well, say you admitted to having a problem. Well, do whatever we need to do to protect Ashley." Ashley stepped forward. "And Derek will leave you when he sees who you really are. A selfish person who won't help her own family. He'll see how you're tearing us apart. And he'll realize you're not worth it." Derek, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I'm standing right here, and I can tell you that's not going to happen. I know exactly who Carmel is. She's the strongest, most honest person I've ever met, and watching you people try to destroy her makes me sick." We left after that. But as we were walking out, I heard voices from the kitchen. I realized the door was slightly ajar, and they did not know I was still in the hallway. I held up my hand to stop Derek, and we listened. Ashley's voice came clearly. "Do you really think she'll take the deal?" Mom responded. "She has to. Margaret Hayes is expensive. We've already cost Carmel her job. Once she runs out of money for the lawyer, she'll have no choice but to use a public defender and take a plea." Then Dad's voice joined in. "I already made sure of that when I called Henderson and Associates. Told them she had substance abuse issues. They're meeting about her future tomorrow. She'll be fired within a week, mark my words. Without income, without savings going to legal fees, she'll break." They were not just passively betraying me. They were actively, methodically destroying every aspect of my life. My job, my reputation, my finances, all of it was under attack from the people who were supposed to love me most. Derek pulled me away before I could storm back in there. In the car, I called Margaret and told her everything. "Good," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Now I know exactly what kind of people we're dealing with. And Carmel? I'm going to bury them." Margaret's prediction came true faster than I expected. 3 days later, I received a call from Human Resources at Henderson and Associates. They were letting me go. Not firing me officially, they said. Just mutually agreeing to part ways during this difficult time. They offered me 2 weeks severance, which was insulting considering I had worked there for 5 years. I sat in my apartment watching my life fall apart piece by piece. My savings were draining fast. Margaret was not cheap, though she had generously reduced her fees when she heard about my job loss. Derek was covering most of our expenses, but I could see the strain it was putting on him. Even worse, Derek's parents had found out about the arrest. They called him and expressed their concerns about our relationship. They didn't say I was bad for him, not in so many words. But they suggested he think carefully about tying himself to someone with legal troubles, someone whose own family was testifying against them. One night, Derek and I were eating a quiet dinner when he said, "Maybe you should consider just taking the deal." I dropped my fork. "What?" He looked miserable. "I'm not saying you're guilty. I know you're innocent. But this is destroying you, Carmel. Your job is gone. Your family has turned against you. My parents are putting pressure on me. Maybe it would be easier to just plead to simple possession, do some community service, and move on with our lives." I felt something inside me crack. Even Derek, the one person I thought would stand by me no matter what, was wavering. I left the table without a word and locked myself in the bathroom, where I cried until my throat was raw. But Margaret was still fighting. A few days later, she called with barely contained excitement in her voice. "Get to my office. Now." I found something big. When I arrived, breathless from practically running the 4 blocks from the bus stop because I had to sell my car to help cover legal fees, Margaret had documents spread across every surface of her office. "Sit down," she said. "And prepare yourself." She handed me Ashley's bank records first. I already knew about the $20,000 in deposits, but Margaret had highlighted something new. "See these withdrawals? 5,000 here, 3,000 there, another 4,000? They're all made just before your parents' mortgage payments." Ashley wasn't just dealing for Marcus to make money for herself. She was helping your parents stay afloat financially. What? I looked closer at the dates. Margaret was right. Every time my parents had a major bill, Ashley had a withdrawal that roughly matched it. "Your parents lost money in some bad investments last year," Margaret explained. "Their retirement fund took a hit. They were struggling to make mortgage payments. Ashley was dealing drugs and funneling money to them. They knew exactly where that money came from, Carmel. They've been complicit in her drug dealing for months because they needed the money. So when Marcus threatened Ashley, I said slowly, they had to protect her. Because if Ashley went down, the truth about the money would come out. They'd be accessories." "Exactly," Margaret said. "But it gets worse. Way worse." She pulled out a thick file. "These are therapy records from when Ashley was 18. Your parents paid for private therapy for her back then. I got them subpoenaed as part of building your defense." I started reading, and with each page, I felt sicker. Ashley had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She had shown patterns of manipulative behavior, pathological lying, and a complete lack of remorse for her actions. The therapist's notes detailed several incidents, including one where Ashley had planted drugs in another student's locker in high school to get her expelled because the girl had gotten a part in the school play that Ashley wanted. Ashley had framed someone before. This was not a desperate decision made in panic. This was a pattern. "The therapist recommended intensive treatment," Margaret said quietly. "Specialized therapy, possibly inpatient treatment. She warned your parents that without proper intervention, Ashley's behavior would escalate. She said Ashley needed help learning empathy and consequences, or she would continue to manipulate and hurt people." "What did my parents do?" I asked, though I already knew. "They pulled her out of therapy after 6 sessions. They decided the therapist was overreacting. They thought they could love her better, could fix her with family support. Instead, they enabled her for 10 years. Every time Ashley did something destructive, they covered for it. Every time she hurt someone, they made excuses. They taught her that there were no real consequences for her actions because they would always be there to shield her." My hands were shaking. They knew. They knew she had problems. They knew she was dangerous, and they just let her keep going. How many people has she hurt over the years? Margaret pulled out her phone. I reached out to Ashley's previous employers. Her first job, she was suspected of stealing cash from the register, but they couldn't prove it. Her second job, 3 coworkers filed complaints about her spreading vicious rumors, but she quit before they could investigate. Her third job, the one where she was suspected of dealing, also had reports of her sabotaging a colleague's work to make herself look better. "She's left a trail of damage everywhere she goes." "And my parents just kept making excuses," I said. "Kept blaming everyone else. The bosses were too hard on her. The coworkers were jealous. They never once considered that maybe Ashley was the problem." Margaret sat down across from me. "Carmel, I need you to understand something. This isn't about you being the golden child and Ashley being the scapegoat. This isn't even about normal favoritism. Your parents have been enabling a person with serious psychological issues for over a decade because admitting Ashley had problems would mean admitting they failed as parents. It was easier to sacrifice you than face that truth. I thought about every time I had been asked to be understanding. Every time I had been told to forgive Ashley because she was struggling. Every time I had made myself smaller so Ashley could feel bigger. It had never been about helping her. It had been about avoiding the hard truth that Ashley needed professional help they were not willing to provide. "We go to trial next month," Margaret said. "And when we do, all of this comes out. The drug dealing, the money laundering by your parents, the therapy records showing Ashley's history of framing people. I'm going to destroy them, Carmel, but I need to know you're ready for that. Because once this comes out, there's no going back. Your family will never forgive you." I looked at the woman who had become my advocate, my defender, my voice when I felt voiceless. "They already don't forgive me," I said, "for the crime of being born, for the crime of being successful, for the crime of refusing to destroy my life for Ashley's mistakes. So yes, I'm ready. Let's tell the truth." The weeks leading up to the pre-trial hearing were brutal. Derek stood by me, but I could see the toll it was taking on him. His parents barely spoke to him. My former colleagues avoided me in public. The local news had picked up the story, and everywhere I went, people whispered and stared. But Margaret was relentless. She built an ironclad case brick by brick. She got Marcus to agree to testify in exchange for immunity on some minor possession charges. He confirmed everything. Ashley had been dealing for him. She had stolen product. She had threatened to go to the police herself until he threatened her first. He had text messages, records, everything. The pre-trial hearing was held on a cold morning in November. I wore the nicest suit I still owned, one I had bought for a work presentation a year ago. Derek sat behind me in the gallery. On the other side of the courtroom, my parents sat with Ashley between them, holding her hands like she was the victim. The prosecutor, a tired-looking man named James Rodriguez, presented the state's case first. It was weak, and even he seemed to know it. The drugs were found in the defendant's childhood bedroom. The defendant's family members reported suspicious behavior. The defendant has no alibi for the day before the discovery. Then Margaret stood up, and I saw the prosecutor's face fall. He knew what was coming. "Your Honor," Margaret said, her voice clear and strong. "The state's case relies entirely on the testimony of 3 witnesses: the defendant's sister Ashley Walker and her parents Linda and George Walker. I would like to present evidence that calls the credibility of all 3 witnesses into serious question." She presented everything. The timeline showing I could not have been at my parents' house the day they claimed. The security footage from my building and my neighbor's camera showing Ashley arriving at the house with a bag and leaving without it. The phone records showing Ashley's calculated call attempts to establish a pattern. The bank records showing drug money and payoffs. Marcus' testimony about Ashley dealing for him. The courtroom was silent except for Margaret's voice methodically destroying the prosecution's case. Then she brought up the therapy records. "Your Honor, I have documents showing that Ashley Walker was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder at age 18. Her therapist documented a pattern of manipulative behavior, including a previous incident where Miss Ashley Walker planted evidence to frame another student. The therapist warned Mr. and Mrs. Walker that without proper treatment, their daughter would continue to escalate this behavior." I watched my parents' faces turn ashen. This was the secret they had kept for 10 years. The truth they had buried because admitting it would mean admitting they had failed. Margaret continued. "Mr. George Walker called the defendant's employer and falsely claimed she had substance abuse problems, directly leading to her termination. Mrs. Linda Walker and Mr. George Walker have received approximately $15,000 from Ashley Walker over the past year. Money that came directly from drug sales. They are not innocent witnesses. They are accessories who have been covering for their daughter's criminal activity for months because they needed the money." Judge Morrison, a stern woman in her 60s, looked over her glasses at my parents. "Is this true?" The prosecutor jumped up. "Your Honor, this is highly prejudicial." "It's highly relevant," Margaret shot back. "The state's entire case rests on the credibility of these witnesses. Their credibility is non-existent." Judge Morrison turned to my parents. "Mr. and Mrs. Walker, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you know the drugs belonged to your daughter, Ashley?" The silence stretched out. I watched my father's face, saw him trying to calculate the least damaging answer. But there was no good answer. If he admitted they knew, they were accessories. If he denied it, Margaret would present the evidence showing the money trail. Finally, Dad spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Ashley had some troubles in the past. That's not what I asked, Judge Morrison said sharply. Did you know the drugs in Carmel's room belonged to Ashley? Dad cracked. Yes, he said. We knew. The courtroom erupted. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. Order! Mom was crying openly now, but I felt no sympathy. Only a cold, hard sense of vindication. And did you ask Carmel to take the blame? The judge continued. We thought. Dad started, then stopped. We thought it would be easier for Carmel to handle. She has resources, opportunities. Ashley's been struggling. So you asked your innocent daughter to plead guilty to a crime she didn't commit to protect your guilty daughter? When she put it that way, there was no way to make it sound reasonable. Dad just nodded miserably. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ashley, who had been sitting quietly between my parents, suddenly stood up. Her face was red, tears streaming down her cheeks, but there was something wild in her eyes. You've always ruined everything, she screamed at me across the courtroom. You were always perfect and I was the screw-up. Mom and Dad loved you more, so I had to make them need me. I had to make you the problem for once. Miss Walker, sit down, Judge Morrison ordered. But Ashley was beyond hearing. 10 years of rage and jealousy and mental illness came pouring out. Yes, I planted the drugs. Yes, I called the police. I wanted to destroy you like you destroyed me just by existing and being better at everything. You had the perfect job, the perfect boyfriend, the perfect life, and what did I have? Nothing. I had nothing except parents who wished I was you. Security officers moved toward her, but she kept screaming. I dealt drugs because it was the only thing I was good at. The only thing Mom and Dad couldn't criticize because they needed the money. They needed me for once instead of perfect Carmel who never did anything wrong. The officers reached her and gently but firmly restrained her. She collapsed into sobs, her confession echoing in the silent courtroom. The court reporter's fingers flew across the keys, documenting every word. My mother sat frozen, her face completely drained of color. My father could not seem to speak, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly. They had spent 10 years enabling Ashley, protecting her, sacrificing me to keep her happy. And in one moment of complete breakdown, Ashley had destroyed them all. Judge Morrison looked at the prosecutor. Mr. Rodriguez, do you wish to continue with this case? The prosecutor looked at his notes, at Ashley being held by security, at my parents' devastated faces. No, Your Honor. The state moves to dismiss all charges against Carmel Walker. Motion granted, Judge Morrison said. Miss Carmel Walker, you are free to go. And Miss Ashley Walker, you are under arrest for filing a false police report, evidence tampering, and possession with intent to distribute. As they led Ashley out in handcuffs, she looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, she said, and for the first time in my life I thought she might actually mean it. But sorry did not undo the damage. Sorry did not give me back the months of hell I had endured. My parents tried to approach me as we left the courtroom, but I walked past them without a word. I had nothing left to say to them. The immediate aftermath was surreal. The local news that had painted me as a drug dealer now ran stories about the woman who had been framed by her own family. The headline read, Woman framed by sister and parents exonerated after lawyer exposes family's dark secrets. The district attorney personally called to apologize. Henderson and Associates reached out the same day. The senior partner, Mr. Henderson himself, called me. Miss Walker, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for how we handled this situation. We should have investigated more thoroughly before taking action. We would like to offer you your position back, but more than that, we would like to promote you to senior accountant. We're prepared to offer you back pay for the entire period of your leave, and we'll be making a public statement supporting you. I went back to work the following Monday. My colleagues, many of whom had avoided me, now couldn't apologize enough. Some brought flowers, others brought coffee and pastries. Sarah, who had been my closest friend at work before the arrest, cried when she hugged me. I'm so sorry I doubted you, she said. I should have known better. It's okay, I told her, even though part of me wanted to stay angry. She had believed the worst about me when she should have known me better. But I was learning that holding on to anger only poisoned me, not the people I was angry at. My professional reputation was not just restored but enhanced. People read about what I had endured and how I had fought back. I got calls from other accounting firms trying to recruit me. A local women's business group asked me to speak about resilience and standing up for yourself. My nightmare had transformed into a strange kind of opportunity. At home, Derek sat me down one evening about a month after the trial. He had been quieter than usual, and I worried that the stress of everything had finally broken us. Instead, he got down on one knee. "I had a whole speech planned," he said, pulling out a ring box. "I was going to take you to the mountains and propose at sunset, but after everything we've been through, I realized I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. Carmel, you are the strongest, most incredible person I have ever known. Watching you fight for yourself, fight for the truth, even when your own family turned against you, made me fall in love with you all over again. Will you marry me?" Through happy tears, I said yes. Then I pulled out the ring I had bought for him, the one I had hidden away months ago before everything fell apart. We both laughed and cried and put rings on each other's fingers. Derek's parents called later that week to apologize. They admitted they had been wrong to doubt me, wrong to pressure Derek. They asked if they could take us to dinner to make amends. I agreed, because unlike my own parents, they were willing to admit their mistakes and try to make things right. But my parents were a different story. They tried to contact me dozens of times. Phone calls, emails, letters, even showing up at my apartment, until I threatened to call the police. I blocked their numbers and returned their letters unopened. I was not ready. Maybe I would never be ready. Ashley was sentenced to 18 months in jail and 3 years of probation. The judge ordered mandatory psychological treatment as part of her sentence. Part of me felt sad for her. She was sick, and our parents had failed her by not getting her the help she needed. But she had also made choices. She had chosen to deal drugs. She had chosen to frame me. Mental illness might explain her actions, but it did not excuse them. 6 months into her sentence, I received a letter from Ashley, forwarded through Margaret. I almost threw it away without reading it, but Derek convinced me to at least look at it. "Dear Carmel," it began. "I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe anything I say. I'm writing this in the therapy group they make us attend here. My therapist says I need to take accountability for my actions without expecting forgiveness, so that's what I'm trying to do. I framed you. I planted those drugs in your room and I called the police and I watched them arrest you, and I felt satisfied. For one moment, you were the problem child instead of me. For one moment, I wasn't the disappointing one. I've spent my whole life being jealous of you. You were smart, successful, responsible. Everything came easy to you while I struggled with everything. That's not an excuse. That's just the truth of how I felt. The therapy here is helping me understand that Mom and Dad didn't actually love you more. They just expected different things from us. They expected you to be perfect because you could be. They expected nothing from me because they'd given up. That's not love. That's 2 different kinds of failure. I'm learning about my disorder. I'm learning why I do the things I do. It doesn't make it okay. It doesn't undo what I did to you. But I'm trying to be better. Not for you, because I know you don't care and you shouldn't. For myself, because I don't want to be this person anymore. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to ever speak to me again. I just wanted you to know that I know what I did was wrong. I know I destroyed your life for months. I know I'm the reason you lost your job and your savings and almost lost Derek. I know saying sorry doesn't fix any of that. I hope you're happy. I really do. You deserve to be happy. Ashley, I read the letter 3 times. Then I put it in a drawer and did not respond. Maybe someday I would. Maybe someday I would be ready to have a conversation with Ashley about what she had done and how we could possibly move forward. But that day was not today, and it might not be tomorrow either. My parents continued their attempts to reach out. 8 months after the trial, they sent a letter through Margaret, respecting the boundary I had set about not contacting me directly. "Dear Carmel," my mother wrote in her careful handwriting, "your father and I have been in therapy every week since the trial. We're trying to understand how we failed both you and Ashley so completely. We know we enabled Ashley's worst behaviors because we were afraid of losing her. We know we took you for granted because you were strong enough to handle anything. We know we asked you to sacrifice yourself one too many times. We can't take back what we did. We can't undo asking you to plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. We can't undo the years of putting Ashley's needs above yours. We can't undo making you feel like your worth was tied to how much you could give up for your sister. We've lost you, and we deserve to lose you. We failed as parents in the most fundamental way. We were supposed to protect you, and instead we threw you to the wolves to save your sister. There's no excuse for that. There's no making that okay. We're not asking you to forgive us. We're not asking you to let us back into your life. We just want you to know that we see now what we did. We see how we hurt you, and we're sorry. We're so terribly sorry. We hear that you're getting married. We're happy for you, truly. We hope Derek treats you the way you deserve to be treated, the way we should have treated you all along. We hope you have a beautiful life full of people who value you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. If you ever decide you want to talk to us, well, be here. But we understand if that day never comes. Love, Mom and Dad. I cried when I read that letter, not because I was ready to forgive them, but because it was the first time in my life they had truly seen me, really seen the damage they had done. Part of me wanted to crumple the letter and throw it away. Part of me wanted to call them and scream about everything they had put me through. Instead, I talked to my therapist about it. I had started seeing someone after the trial, working through the trauma of being betrayed by my own family. She helped me understand that I did not owe my parents forgiveness just because they had apologized. Forgiveness was something I could choose to give if and when I was ready, not something they were entitled to because they finally felt bad about what they had done. Derek and I got married in a small ceremony a year after the charges were dropped. We invited Derek's family, my closest friends, and some colleagues from work. We did not invite my parents or Ashley, who was still in jail. Some people might think that was cruel, but I had learned that protecting my own peace was not cruelty, it was survival. On my wedding day, as I stood in front of the mirror in my dress, I thought about the girl I had been a year ago, the girl who would have considered taking the fall for Ashley because that's what good daughters did, the girl who had been trained to sacrifice herself for family harmony. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who understood that real love did not demand destruction, who had learned that standing up for yourself was not selfish. Derek and I bought a house 6 months after the wedding. It was a small craftsman-style home with a big backyard and a porch swing. We painted the nursery a soft yellow because we did not want to know if we were having a boy or girl. We just wanted to be surprised. When our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Because after everything we had been through, she represented a new beginning, a chance to build a family based on love and honesty instead of manipulation and favoritism. My parents sent a card and a gift when Hope was born. I opened the card but sent the gift back. I was not ready to have them in my daughter's life. Maybe I never would be. But I had learned that was okay. I did not owe them access to my child just because they wanted redemption. Ashley was released from jail when Hope was 3 months old. She sent a birthday card for the baby with a simple note inside. Congratulations on your beautiful family. Still working on being better. No address, no phone number, no request for contact. Just acknowledgement and space. I kept that card too. One afternoon, when Hope was 6 months old, I sat with her in the rocking chair in her nursery. The walls were covered with pictures. Derek and me on our wedding day, Hope's newborn photos, images of Derek's parents holding their granddaughter. There were no pictures of my parents, no images of Ashley, just the family I had chosen and the family I had created. I looked at the photo on the wall, one that Derek had found in a box of my old things. It was me at age 5, before I had learned to make myself small. I was grinning at the camera, confident and happy, wearing a dinosaur costume for Halloween. My parents had never displayed that picture because Ashley had thrown a fit about not being in it, but I displayed it now, in my daughter's room, a reminder of who I had been before I learned to sacrifice myself for others. As I rocked Hope, I whispered to her all the things I wished someone had told me when I was young. You don't have to earn love by giving up pieces of yourself. You don't have to be small so others can feel big. You don't owe anyone your dreams, your peace, or your truth. Real family protects you, not sacrifices you. And if you ever have to choose between being liked and being free, choose freedom every single time. Hope yawned and nestled closer, completely unaware of the hard-won wisdom I was trying to impart. But I would tell her again and again as she grew up. I would make sure she knew her worth was not tied to how convenient she was for others. The doorbell rang and Derek called up that his parents had arrived for dinner. I carried Hope downstairs, where Derek's mother immediately reached for her granddaughter with eager arms. We had a family, just not the one I had been born into. We had love, just not from the people I had expected it from, and that was okay. Better than okay. It was exactly what I needed. As we sat around the dinner table that night, laughing and talking and passing hope from person to person, I realized something important. My parents had tried to make me believe that family was everything, that I should sacrifice anything to keep family together. But they were wrong. Family was not everything. Peace was everything. Truth was everything. Self-respect was everything. And I had fought for all of those things and won. The scars from what my family did to me would probably never fully heal. There would always be a part of me that mourned the parents I should have had, the sister I could have been close to if things had been different. But I had learned that you could mourn what should have been, while still being grateful for what was. What was pretty wonderful. A husband who loved me for exactly who I was. A daughter who would grow up knowing she was valued not for what she could do for others but for simply being herself. A career I had rebuilt from the ashes. Friends who had proven their loyalty. Derek's parents who had shown me what supportive family looked like. I had learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the greatest act of love is walking away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Especially if they're family. As I put Hope to bed that night, singing her a lullaby my grandmother had once sung to me, I thought about everything that had happened. The arrest, the betrayal, the trial, the vindication. All of it had nearly destroyed me. But it had also transformed me. I was no longer the woman who would consider taking the fall for someone else's crime. I was no longer the daughter who made herself small to keep the peace. I was Carmel. Wife, mother, survivor, fighter. Woman who had faced the worst her family could do to her and come out stronger on the other side. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. So here's my question for you. Have you ever felt like you had to sacrifice yourself to keep peace in your family? Have you ever been the responsible one who everyone expected to just handle it while others got away with everything? How did you find the strength to set boundaries and stand up for yourself? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own family dynamics, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people finding their strength in impossible situations. And share this with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to put themselves first, that standing up for yourself is not selfish, it's survival. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you find the courage to fight for yourself the way I finally learned to fight for me. Remember, you are worth protecting, even from the people who are supposed to love you most. Take care of yourselves, set those boundaries, and never let anyone convince you that your peace is less important than their comfort. Until next time, stay strong and know your worth.